So I want to be able to give you a quick crash course here on Premiere. I want to go through the basics. So if you had to edit a video today, these basics would get you through editing a simple video. And then after, I will populate this with footage and we'll look at more details for each section. In the upper left section, you have the source section, and that's where you view your raw video clips. In the upper right, you have your program section, and that's your end result with the video that you're building out. Then you have your audio meters in the lower right corner, and that will monitor your audio and the audio tracks here in the sequence timeline. And the sequence timeline is where you have your layers of video tracks and audio tracks, and you can use the video playhead and different tools to cut and arrange your video. Now this next small section has 8 tools, and you'll use these in your sequence timeline once footage is there. You have your selection tool, your track select forward tool, a ripple edit tool, a razor tool, that's going to be your most popular, a slip tool, a pen tool, a hand tool, and a type tool. And we'll talk more about what these do once we have some footage. And the bottom left over here is your project bin. And as you import footage, this is where you will see all of your clips, and you have a couple different view options there. Now up the very top you have learning, assembly, editing, color, effects, audio, graphics, libraries, my workspace, and 5-camera workplace. Now the two that I use the most are editing and effects, and you can switch back and toggle between those to see what kind of layout you want. Also notice you have these lines in between each section. You can roll over left and right or up or down to make the workspace how you want it to be. Now coming up here to the top, you have different layouts, and if you want to see what Adobe has for you, you can click Learning, and they have some basics for getting started. Looking at that might give you a few extra tips that you can use. Assembly gives you one less window, and editing is the one that is my favorite. If you're dealing with color correction, you might switch to color. If you're dealing with effects, you might switch to effects. And if you're working on just the audio portion, you might switch over to audio. What it does is it gives you some extra filters and folders to play with. And if you click on the graphics tab, it will give you some additional templates that Adobe offers. So you can click there, and there are some free templates for graphics and things like that. Now if you get lost, this happens every now and then. If you go to Window and Workspaces and you select all panels, that's a great one to start with because it's not specifying only effects or only audio. It gives you a wide range of things to choose from. And you can even save your own workspace when you get the one that you like the best. Real quickly, just want to give you a real quick demonstration here. I'm going to bring some footage in, and there's a couple different ways to do it, and I have one lesson after this where you can just focus in on importing footage. But I want to be able to bring in just a couple clips here so you can now see what this program looks like when it's populated with some footage. So I have some stock footage from New York. I'm just going to bring that in. Now I have my source bin over here, and you can toggle back and forth between a list view or an icon view. Once you click on the footage, now we populate that source window, and we can see our footage up here on the left. Now there are a lot of different settings. One thing you might want to do is it's playing back at full resolution. So if you select this box here and maybe take it to half, it won't be so demanding on your processor, and it's a little bit easier to view. Now you have these icons here. One is an icon for just the video only, and you can drag the video only into your sequence timeline. And now all of a sudden you have your sequence timeline, and this is where you do all of your editing. Now on the right side, that's my final destination. That's going to be my end result. So after I add all of my cuts and effects and I'm done with my video, you'll see your end result on the right side. So anytime you want to see what you're doing, you just hit play on that side, and it will play your final video, what it's going to look like before you export it. Now on the right side, we have some effects here, so you can see that I'm just clicking on that and I'm adding that to the video. So I just want to give you a demonstration of the difference between your end result here and your source clip, your original source clip. And if you wanted to add some effects, you can just double click on that, or you can just drag it over into your footage. Once we add our effects, we can go to Effect Controls, and on the left side it records all of the effects that we've added here. So you see I added 6 or 7 of them, so I'm going to just click on them, right click and clear to get rid of them because I don't want all of those. And now we're back to our footage. And now if you want to cut footage, use this razor blade. That's one of the most popular tools that I use there. And if you select that, then you can start making your cuts. And if you wanted to select the footage after you make those cuts, you can grab the arrow, which is the selection tool, and you can click right on the footage. Now this isn't the best way to edit footage. I'm just showing you how you could cut footage in the timeline. If you want to get more precise, you would look at the footage on that left source window and edit that way. But I'm trying to give you just a quick crash course as to how this program operates, so when you start your lessons, it'll make a little more sense. So now you see I've cut this clip into 5 different parts. Now what I want to do is I just want to bring in a music track. So I'm going to search my computer for an MP3 or WAV file, drag it into my project bin down on the left, and again I can select the icon, the audio icon this time, and I can drag it into my audio track. So you have your video tracks up north, and down south would be your audio tracks, A1, A2, and A3. So I dragged this one into A3. You might have a voiceover on A2, and you may have some sound effects for cars passing might be on A1. Something else you can do is you can roll over the footage on the end. So it gives you this tool where you can just roll over the end, and then you can hold the left button down on the mouse and you can extend it or shorten it that way. And if you want to fade music, you use these keyframes here, and you add a keyframe and you bring out the audio all the way down by taking the second dot there, which is a keyframe, and you bring it all the way down. And then you can do the same thing to the video. So I add a keyframe and then I bring it all the way down, and as I roll over it, it fades out. And it would fade out the music as well. So that's a basic rundown as to how Premiere works. Now you have your video and you want to export it because you're done. So you come up here to File, Export Media, and you have a lot of different formats there. H.264 is one of the most popular compressions there is. You would change the output name by clicking there, and you can also select the type of video. So if you want it to be 4K or 1080p or 720, there's a lot of different formats there. And then you would hit export and it would save the file for you. Alright, so that's a really quick introduction as to how Premiere basically works, and we'll get into more of the details in each individual lesson if you proceed. Alright, so here's a quick way to import footage. Now one thing you can do, I'm on a Mac, so I can just open up the Finder and find the clips that I want, and hold Command C down and select as many as I want and drag them in at once. Once you have them in this project bin, you can click on the icons down below back and forth. It will give you a list view or an icon view. Now if you don't like dragging in the footage, another way you can import footage is to go to File, Import, and it will open up the Finder window for you, and you can go ahead and find the clips and select the Import button, or just double click on the video file. So for this, I'll just grab a different clip, teacher teaches in a classroom, and there I have it. So those are the 2 ways that you can import footage. Alright, so let's look at these 2 clips. I want to show you a couple different options that you have for cutting video. Now I'm holding the left button down on the mouse and I'm grabbing this slider and I'm just going back and forth. It gives me a little more freedom. Or I can just hit the play button. Now if I want to access the video down below, you have to double click on it. Just clicking on it once won't do it. So double click on it and it will access that video. And again, if you don't like the list view, you can come down here to the icon. There's also a slider down below that you can grab. I don't recommend that, but that's good for like a quick reference. If you want to rename the clip, you can click on the title and then rename it. So let's grab a section of this video. So I have my in point and my out point. Then I also have the option of just bringing in the video or bringing in the audio or both. So for this, I don't want the audio track, so I'm just going to bring in the video track. Once I drag that in, my sequence timeline appears. Now there's a couple different ways I can cut the video. I can roll over the end and it gives me this out tool or in tool. And if I hold the mouse down, then I can drag the clip in or out. Or I can use the razor blade and come down here and cut each section. Once I do that, I go back to the selection tool and select those parts and then hit delete on the keyboard and they disappear. Now let's go to my other clip. So I have my in point and my out point. So I'll select where I want it to end and I have in and out and I'll bring in the whole clip that way. Now if you don't want to see it, you can toggle this eye and it will only show you the tracks that have the eye unselected. So I'm going to roll over the end and trim that part, and I'm going to use the razor blade and it will snap to the edge. So as you roll over these points, see how it gives you that white line there? It's snapping to the edge for you, so it makes it a little bit easier. And then I'll go ahead and select the clips that I don't want and hit delete on the keyboard, and now I've got my two clips going back and forth as if the dog is dreaming about the other dog, is the story that I'm trying to tell. Alright, so that's a quick way on how to cut footage. Alright, when I first started editing, I made the mistake of not making folders in the project bin. It can be pretty overwhelming when you're looking for something or need to make a change and you can't find it. You can always do a search, but sometimes if you just organize it by folder, it's a lot easier. So what you can do is you can make folders like footage, audio, special effects, PowerPoint slides, sequences, sound effects, stills, stock footage, but you can create a new folder just by hitting that tab down at the bottom. Now the next thing you need to do is you need to mirror this exactly. So the name of this project is Video Project University 2. So in that folder, everything should line up exactly the same as it is in my media browser here in Premiere. Now it also has the ability to create an autosave file, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Now you want to make sure that you save your project file in the same folder. So I created this folder, Video Project University 2, and I'm going to call that project the same name and choose that location. Now when I go and look in that folder, you'll see I have my original project and then the second one I just created. Now I also have this autosave folder. If you want to create an autosave, you go to Premiere Pro Settings and select autosave, and then you can choose how often you want the computer to save it for you. I get in a habit of just hitting Command S, on my own frequently in case my computer crashes, but if you can hit that autosave, it will save the project file, and if something happens, you can always go back to the version 10 minutes earlier and see it. You can see you start accumulating these project files that it's saving about every 5 or 10 minutes depending on what you pick. Now the next thing that's important is if you're working with a client and they want the project file, and a lot of clients do, or you're working with an editor, what you need to do is compress everything in that folder. Video University Project 2 is now compressed. Now I can use something like Google Drive and I can upload that file, Video Project University 2, as a zipped file, and I can just upload it, and then the green check shows that it's there. And then if I look, I'll see all of those assets are just the way they were in the project file. So you want them all to be exactly the same. The next thing is I can share it, so I'll just share it to myself and I'll type in my email and I'll give, access to whoever I'm sharing it to, and I might even just send them a note, hey, I'm sending this to you, put down, inside what it is and go ahead and send it. I'm going to show you, I want to open this other file that I have that somebody sent to me, and they didn't send all the assets that I need. So when Premiere opens that up, it's looking for all these files and I have no idea where they are. So I can have Premiere search for it, or I can locate it. So in this situation, it would be really easy because I would just go to Video University Project 2 and I would look for that folder, and anything that is not sent over in those folders, there would be no other place for you to find it. You saw how many files were in the project file, like 200 or something. You'll spend tons of time looking for these things. So for this, I'm going to bring in a music track. I just have some stock video clips of people dancing for this. So for this, I have this dancing music track, and you can find it in your Finder and drag it right into the sequence, or you can drag it right into your project bin. Once you do that, you can look at the waveform up there and you can examine the peaks and valleys of that audio track. You can also zoom in all the way. This is more beneficial if you have a voiceover track, but if you need to identify a certain part of a song, you may see differences in the audio. But for this, I'm going to pick my in point and out point, and I just want maybe 15 seconds or so, and then I can drag it in with that little audio icon. Now it's in my sequence as audio track 1, and you can see there's no audio at the very beginning of the song, so I'm going to roll over it and trim off the edge. Now to see more of the audio track, I can use the slider on the right hand side, which gives me that band in the middle, and I can now add keyframes for fading in or fading out the music. So I want to add a keyframe, maybe 1 or 2 seconds in, and I can bring the first keyframe all the way down. So this makes it so you cannot hear the audio if that keyframe is all the way down at the bottom, and you can see the decibel levels when you do that. And I'll do the same thing to the end. I want to fade the music out, so I'm going to make 2 keyframes, and you can drag it anywhere you want. If those 2 are closer together, it will fade out quicker, and if you wanted to delay the fading, you could extend it and have it take longer, just as you're going down the seconds of the sequence timeline. So now I have my basic music track and it matches the video, so you can see that it's the same length. Now if it's too loud, it looks like it is because on these audio meters it's in the red, so they call that you're in the hot zone. So you can either do it 2 ways. You can adjust the audio gain, or you can just grab that band, the whole thing, and bring it down a little bit. So for this, if I right click, I can select audio gain, and I can adjust the gain to a certain number, or I can select the second circle right there and bring it down a few decibels. The other thing you can do is the M and S. One is for mute and the other one is for solo. So if you have various music tracks and you want to decide which track fits the video better, you could select M for mute to mute that track, or you can select solo. Like if you have, let's say, 5 tracks, you can hit solo and it will mute the other 4. To demonstrate what that is, I'm going to bring in a second audio track, and if I hit S for solo, it would play the first one, and if I hit S for the second one, it would solo that second track. Mute would mute the first track. Alright, so let's look at a basic audio clip, which is my voiceover on one of the other tutorials. And so when I record this, I use a lavalier mic, but when it comes in, it doesn't sound real professional. The first thing you want to do is you want to raise the volume. So if you hit the right button on your mouse, you can select the audio gain. And what you're doing is you're trying to raise the audio level so it reaches the yellow. You don't want to go into the red, but if you look at these audio meters on the right, oftentimes a studio will have you send your footage back or your final project back if you're in the red hot zone, they call it. So if you stay in that yellow, that's a good measurement tool. So if you come over to effects, there's an equalizer. It's the 10 band one, which is the basic one, and you can just bring it right over to the voice track. Then what I do is I add a little bass to it. So I don't use the first one, that's real bassy. I use the second and third slider, and then I add a little treble to it, and just that much, just raising it up just a tiny bit, will give you a much better sound. So if you just toggle back and forth with the FX button, you can see the before and after. Now to get even more precise, go ahead and use these sliders on the bottom to zoom in. So I have some pops in my microphone. You hear those P's and things like that. So something that helps but won't eliminate it completely, what you really need is a filter in front of your mic so that way you don't get those pops. But you can make it sound better, and sometimes you can eliminate those if you just put these keyframes in there and look for that pop. You see the waveform in there goes all the way off. You see the red in the audio meter, which is telling you it's, distorted. So what you can do is, right when that happens, use these keyframes to take the audio level down, and as you're listening to it in real time, it happens so quickly that you won't hear the fade in the volume if you do it right. So the idea is to fade out very quickly right before that happens and then fade back in. So those are some basic tricks that will help you when you're bringing in your audio voice track. So go ahead and grab this interview clip and bring it in. There are a lot of uhs or some stuttering and thoughts and things like that, and so you can do this with any audio clip to remove the ums and uhs and things like that. So that's really the purpose here. So as we listen to this, I want to identify what those are.
Here we are in the jungle in New York City, a legendary spot. Alicia Keys and Swizz Beatz, real estate and business and creativity all come together. They're just amazing, those two. And I love this space. You've spent time in here. You did, well, you worked with Jay on Magna Carta in here?
Yeah, I was...
So the first one I come to is right here at about 17 seconds in. And I just want to clean up his audio a little bit, so I want to cut that out. Now when I remove the video and audio with it, I can right click and then hit ripple delete, but what it does is it creates a jump cut. So we are going to cover these cuts up with another image. Well, let's see if we can find the next one here.
Say album. So I co-wrote some tunes on that.
All right, now this section is a little unclear as to what he's saying, and you also have to think about, is this information relevant or not? And I think we can do without it, and it makes him sound a little more professional. And so we cut that out, and then we'll right click on that space and ripple delete. And we can even go back a little bit further, so I'm going to cut that section out. And move that back, and then right click and ripple delete to take up the seam, and then eventually we'll cover that up with another image. Now to get even more specific, I want to zoom in on the timeline, and we're really looking for these gaps. So I want to cut that gap out there, and then I'll right click and hit ripple delete.
Well, you worked with Jay on Magna Carta in here?
There's a lot that's happened in the studio. I mean, the Beyonce album.
I mean, did you really have to start with that straight up? With Jay on Magna Carta in here?
Yeah, I was... there's a lot that's happened in the studio. I mean, the Beyonce album. So I co-wrote some tunes on that.
I mean, did you really have to start with that straight up? Well, you worked with Jay on Magna Carta in here?
There's a lot that's happened in the studio. I mean, the Beyonce album.
I mean, did you really have to start with that straight up?
Now, since I don't have any images to grab to bring in, I'm just going to show you a trick that you can use with the existing footage. So I'm going to use my marker in and marker out point to just grab a section from the video, and I'm going to cover up those cuts. Notice I'm only bringing in the video track, so it gives me that option. I can select video or audio with those two icons. We don't want another audio track. Now I will go to Effect Controls, and I'm just going to zoom in and get a shot of either the interviewer or Justin Timberlake. Now if I go over to Effects in the folder Image Control, I can grab the black and white filter, And some might argue that I don't want to have a shot of Justin sitting there while he's talking, but every once in a while we see something creative like that. All right, but the main thing is I'm covering the jump cut. So as you're cleaning up your audio, it's looking at something else, and it also detracts the audience from listening to the audio track. But this happens all the time. People don't speak clearly all the way through seamlessly. Now the style of the interview was a little bit different, where it was a little more raw, but if you wanted to clean it up and shorten it, that would be the way you would do it. So what I'm looking for, you can see in the audio waveform in the audio track, you can already see the gaps there without even hearing it. And so just taking up a lot of those gaps, as long as you cover up your cut in the video, it works. Now he says the same thing twice.
Jay came in to do a feature on. Jay came in to do a feature on.
So I want to see if I can blend those two words together. And oftentimes you can get away with it. So first we'll use ripple delete to get rid of that extra space. And then to bridge that gap, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift that video up one track and bring the audio down one track. And if you use the marker, you can bring that video back just so it overlaps a couple frames. And that way it's not so abrasive. And as you roll over it, you can blend the two words together.
Jay came in to do a feature on. Jay came in to do a feature on. Jay came in to do a feature on.
So when we play it back, it plays a lot cleaner, and it's a little more interesting as it cuts away to other parts that help tell the story. All right, so I wanted to show you how you can make a transition fairly easily and quickly. So I have two videos here, one of a woman turning and the other of a sunset. Now if you go to Effects and you go to Video Transitions, you'll see this folder here, and you can grab something like a dissolve, which is pretty common, and drag that into one of the videos. And then if you click on the transition once, it will open up a new window for you under Effect Controls, and you can see the two videos there are joined together by that transition in the diagonal line. And you can toggle the end at cut or center of cut, and it will place it there for you, or you can roll over the end of the transition and lengthen it that way. And then as you play it, you can see your effect and what you're modifying. Now, if you want to zoom in and get more precise, you can grab that slider at the bottom. And if you want to change the duration of the transition, you can roll over that and make it longer or shorter. And if you double click on the transition and you wanted to change the time, you could do that way. It's a little bit of a longer step, but that's another option for you. Now, if you want to add a different transition, just go ahead and click on the transition in the sequence timeline and drag over another one, and it will automatically replace the previous. So now I've grabbed dip to white, which is another common transition, and you can roll through the videos and it will show you as you hold the left button down on the mouse. So there are several folders here to choose from, and you can pick different effects that will work for you. Another one here is page peel, and you can drag that over and replace the previous, and we don't see that one too often, but it is in there. Now if you go to the effect controls, you can see the two videos, and you check that box and it will show you the actual sources in the effect controls. And then if you roll over the scrub bar, it will take you through, and you can also reverse the transition if you check that box, and the page peel will come in from the opposite corner. Another one you might want is barn doors, so you can grab that filter and replace the previous. And something else you could do would be a center split, and that would take one video and separate it into 4 pieces. So this is a simple way to add an effect transitioning from one video to the next. So I want to be able to show you how to make a blur transition. And I'll give you this project file and the videos as well as the commands here so you can copy it. But starting from scratch, if I place the two videos here, you see it just makes a direct cut. So if I type in push up here, I can bring in this push transition. Now you can use this one also without blurring it, and it just is a simple way to go from one clip to the next. You can change the frame length. so it's not so long. I went with 4 frames, and that might be too quick, so you might go 12 frames. Somewhere between 4 and 12 is probably the right amount. The next thing you can do is come down here to this little icon and you can create an adjustment layer. Then drag the adjustment layer and match the push cut length. Then what you can do is bring in a directional blur. If you type in DIR, it should give you that filter. You drag it over, and if you play with the direction and blur length, you can see what it does here. So it's like a 360 circle, and you see the direction of the lines in the blur as you rotate that around. 90 degrees is pretty popular, but you may want something different. And then the length of the blur is lengthening it by a percentage, and you have to decide, how blurry you want it to be. For this, at 27%, it's pretty decent, but I might be able to, punch it up a little bit more. And you'll see very quickly how it blurs while it's making that transition. That will work, and you can also copy this adjustment layer and paste it over several videos that you have and use it over and over again. The last thing I'll give you is this golf club whoosh, and you can bring it in right under and sync it in. So we'll make the point in the audio wave file just line up with the 2 videos and where they cut. That should be it. All right, so this project file is included, and if you want to download it, please do. And you can use this adjustment layer in the project file for your future videos if you just bring those in. So one of the things you can do is you can use these filters that Adobe Premiere gives you. Now there are a ton of folders to go through, but I'm just going to give you some basics. Now this is some stock footage that I got. It's just some people walking in the airport. Now I'm going to add some filters to it. So if you go to Effects over here on the left-hand side, and you grab a couple of these filters, you can see what they do. So the first one is blur and sharpen. And oftentimes you'll see some stock footage, and in the background the images are blurred, and then you can place some text over it. So for this, you can blur the background by just dragging the Gaussian blur filter over, and then under Effect Controls, if you come over here, you can adjust the blurriness. Something else you can do under the channel folder is to grab the arithmetic filter. If you select the and toggle, you can play with the red, blue, and green values, which will give you some color. And if you wanted to get a little more crazy, you can select the XOR, which will give you more of a almost a vibrant cartoon effect. Something else you can do is if you go over here to color correction, you can grab the brightness and contrast. So oftentimes that will help liven up your footage or fade it out. Another filter that I use often is black and white. If you just go over to image control, you can drag the black and white filter. And anytime you want to toggle those on or off, you can just check that FX button and you can see what it's like with or without the filters that you bring in. And Premiere gives you some third-party plugins like Magic Bullet. If you wanted to do that, you would have to pay for the service. There's some pretty cool film effects with Magic Bullet, but there's also some others that Adobe gives you, which is Lumetri, but I'm not going to go in that right now. Something else you can use is crop. So if you go to transform and drag that crop filter, you can take out the left and right, or if you wanted to give yourself that film look with the letterbox. This isn't the best way to do it, but it's a quick way to take out the top and bottom. So you can also just type in the number. So I can type in 14%, or I can scroll left and right to bring the top and bottom down. So that's a quick way to give you a film look. And you can toggle black and white or some of the other effects that go with it. So for this lesson, I want to be able to show you how to import pictures and add scaling to it, where it zooms in and zooms out. Also, you can add a transition in between the pictures and change the colors to black and white, and you can also add a frame around the outside. Alright, so the first thing you can do is just drag your folder in with your pictures, and you can then drag each photo into the sequence timeline. And notice Premiere makes them all the same length. If you have a lot of photos, you can just highlight all of them and bring them all into the sequence timeline, and it will place them together for you. And again, Premiere by default will select the length for you, and they'll all be the same. The other thing though is you may not have the same aspect ratio for each photo, so you can go to the scaling under Effect Controls, and you can move them in or out depending on where you want them to be, if they're too far away or close, or if the perspective is not right. Alright, so now that we have our photos in the sequence timeline, the next thing we can do is add a basic transition. So if you go to Effects, and down here at the bottom you have Video Transitions, and a popular one is just a cross dissolve. So if you drag that over in between the two photos, it will place the filter there for you. And if you move this slider up on the right hand side, you're able to see the photos in the timeline, and that can be helpful. So now as I roll over, holding the left button down on the mouse, it will do the transition for me, or I can just play the sequence and it will do that. Eventually you may need to render the file, so as I'm making this, you'll see the movement on the pictures, but it's not 100% clear. Just to show you the length of each photo to make sure that they're all the same, you can always do a quick test and stack them up just to make sure that it's, you know, the same length for each. If you are doing your own modification, maybe it's 3 seconds wide, or maybe it's 3 seconds long. So for this, they're all 5 seconds, and so you can do that by selecting the in and out point on your destination window. Alright, so I have my 3 basic photos here, and I've added that dissolve transition. Now what I want to do is I want to have this photo just slowly move in. Sometimes it's called the Ken Burns effect. He was a documentary filmmaker that did certain effects with photos, and that's where that comes from. So for this, I'll want to have it move in maybe 5% or so. So I can start my keyframe at 100, and I can have it end at 105. Greater the number, the closer the picture is going to be to the viewfinder. Okay. Now, some of the things you can do is you can copy that effect and you can paste it to the other photos. But since I have a different aspect ratio on these, it will change the aspect ratio. So I would have to lock down the position in order for it to do that. But as we move along here, I'll show you some shortcuts. So if you want the same effect to each photo, you can copy and paste the attributes. So adding the scaling, I'll do the same thing to the other 2 photos. So I'll start it, this one is at 65, and I'll move it up 5%. And now we can see it slowly move forward. Alright, so all 3 have that scaling now. You're adding 2 keyframes for each. And if you want to see this with better resolution, you can highlight this area on the timeline and select render into out, and it will render it for you. So I have my in point, out point. It'll highlight that area in gray, and it will change the yellow to green. And now I can see it in full resolution. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to add a matte layer. So I created this in Photoshop, and all it is a black image, and then I cut out the center, and it's a PSD file. So if I drag that over the top, we can't see it because the image is larger. I'll scale it down. So basically here's the image, and I'll position it where I want it. But once you place that over your images, you can adjust the images by the position, moving them up or down or left or right. Now if you don't like this hard edge look, you could add a Gaussian blur If you come over here to the folder Blur and Sharpen, add that effect, and then come up to Effect Controls, you can add the amount of blur that you want on that black matte, and it will soften up the edges for you. So now this second photo is off a little bit, so I'll just position the Y coordinate and bring it up. If you don't like the way these images look, you can come over here to the Lumetri presets, and there are a lot of different filters here. So if you wanted to make it look like a richer film stock, or change it to black and white, it'll give you an idea of what it's going to look like before you bring it over, and then you just drag the filter over to the picture, and then you have a different look. Alright, and the last thing that you can do is if you just click on these transitions, hit delete on the keyboard to remove them. Another effect that you commonly see is fading in and fading out to black. So if you add these keyframes, one in the middle, one in the beginning, and one in the end, and you bring them down so that opacity layer is all the way down, it would fade to black for you. Now, instead of adding that over and over again to each picture, you can just copy that opacity by right-clicking and selecting the opacity. Copy that and then select the other pictures that you want to paste that command to. Right-click and paste the attributes. Now, make sure it's just the opacity that you want to copy and paste. If you had other things, you could paste it as well, but for this it's just the opacity, and then it will add that effect to every single picture you have. So if you have like 50 pictures, you can copy one command, right click, and then paste the attributes to the other photos. Alright, so those are some quick and easy techniques on how you can modify your photos and bring some life to them, and hope that helps. I gave you a rundown of what the project file looks like, but let's go ahead and make it from scratch. I want to create the background. So down here is a color matte. So if I click on that, click on color matte, it's 3840 by 2160, which is the sequence timeline is in 4K. Now I'm going to select blue and hit OK. And let's just type in color matte blue and hit OK. And now I've got it. Now drag it into your sequence timeline. Now there we have it. Now I added this vignette under the effects. Now notice I'm working on the workspace effects. There are a lot of different layouts. This is the one I like the best. So click that one if you don't see it the way I have it. Now down here under Lumetri color, you have this vignette, and you can create this gradient three-dimensional look. I gave it a little bit of depth and then I feathered it out. The next thing I want to do is I want to type a title. So let's click Type Tool and click right on the screen and type Jeff Napolitano and hit Command A and come over here to Essential Graphics, and that will open up all of the settings for the font. I don't like this font, so I'm going to change it to another one I don't like. And now I can click the selection tool over here and grab the corner and make it as big as I want. I can also use this slider, and I can also use position and scaling over here. What I want to do is I want to center it. So these align and transform tools give you the option to center it horizontally and also vertically. I use this ruler down here, which gives me these lines on the screen, and I often use them just to let myself know when I'm using titles if they're right or wrong. Now, in order to make this spin, I go over here to Effects and I grab Basic 3D. So if I type in BAS, I get the Basic 3D effect that shows up under the Perspective folder, and I can just drag it right onto that name clip. Something else I can do real quick is if I want to differentiate here on my timeline the two different colors to help me know what's different, I can go to label if I right click and then just pick something else. So now I have the two different layers there. Now over here I have this basic 3D. Now these are the two commands that will allow you to swivel it or tilt it. So you see there's an axis for each one and it's swiveling or tilting. Now to add the animation, what I did was I first zoomed in. So about right here is where I want it to end up, and I want to start it off the screen. So we pull it in like that. And if it's not centered, I can raise that up in the middle so that way it zooms in this way. Okay, I'll put my rulers back on. Now, if I don't want lowercase, I also have the option to change it to all caps. Now it's not centered, so I go here and center it, and now I'm good. So we've added a simple animation which it comes in onto the screen. Now I want to tilt it. So my starting point is 0. So I'm going to hit the stopwatch because I want to add a keyframe at 0. But then I want to rotate it twice. So what I'll do is I'll just rotate it around until it says 2x. So basically what it's doing, it's going around 360 degrees twice. Once it gets to 360, then it goes to another number, whole number. All right, so now we've added the animation and it's spinning around. Now oftentimes when things are moving with our eyes, we can't capture every single frame in real life, so you add a directional blur, and I can type in dir and bring that in and do the same type of command. So I'll add a keyframe for a directional blur, and there's two things here. One is the blur length. You know, you can go as high as you want, and then there's the direction. So this is actually moving vertically, but if I wanted to move it horizontally, then I would change this to 90 degrees, and then now it moves that way. And so if I'm pulling it off the screen right or left, I'm gonna wanna have that directional blur going from side to side. So that's a little bit too much down here, but let's bring it down to maybe something like this. Okay, 33. Now, I want the directional blur to start here. So I'm gonna hit that stopwatch at this point. But over here, I want it to be at 0. So I'll click here and hit 0, click out and do the same for the bottom, and now it's at 0, and the directional blur starts here. But we haven't moved it off the screen yet, so I'm going to move this whole piece, and right in here when it gets blurry, that's when I want to pull it off the screen. So let me go ahead and add 2 more keyframes. So I have the position and scale locked in, and from here to here it stays at those lock numbers. So you can see if you watch the numbers, they're not moving, but the numbers are moving here. So you don't always have to look at the screen. You can look at these numbers to tell you what's happening. So you can see the bottom number, the scale is going from 0 to 102.7 KISS FM if you're from Los Angeles, and you can see the top 2 numbers, which is X and Y. All right. So now it blurs out and I want to pull it off the screen here. All right, so we see that top number change go from 2128 all the way off the screen to 5503. Okay, so now playing it from the start, it comes in, spins, and pulls off. The other thing is adding in that sound effect, the golf club, right? And so I'll go ahead and bring that in, and you can have this for your own file. And this one here, we see the waveform. I'll just bring in the audio, and what you want to do is you can open this up a little bit so you can see it, and you can open this up. And about right there is when I want to line up what's happening here with the sound. So obviously this is the loudest part. So as it starts, it should happen there. So as it makes each rotation, I should replicate this sound. Now I can hit Option and just drag it again and move it over. Hit Option, drag it again and move it over. hit Option, drag it again, and move it over. Now I've created 3 copies, 1, 2, 3, and I want it to stop when it comes off the screen. So I probably need to pull this in a little bit closer, and there, and there, right? So 1, 2, 3, and then it comes off the screen. All right. And that's pretty much it. That's going from scratch. It comes in, makes the sound, and pulls off the screen. So this is a Groupon commercial with Tiffany Haddish, and you see the title reveal itself in the middle of the screen. So we will do 2 things. We'll make that appear and then also add in that green graphic. So first thing is we'll just type in Groupon, and I tried to match the position of it. And so we'll put that in the center. Then we'll drag crop. And if we go to the bottom and we raise that up, you see it disappear. As we use that Y coordinate for motion, we can see it reveal itself. And since it needs to be a little bit lower, I'll find where that spot should be. And so about 476 is where I want it to end up. So I'll add a keyframe there. I want to start it a little bit further down off the screen where it's cropped out. And then when I play it, it will reveal itself. Now for the second part, you can create a square, and you could match the color with the eyedropper tool, and you could select the original Groupon on the left to match that color. Then bring it underneath and roll over the end to make it the same length. And once that Groupon title reveals itself, then you can scale up the green graphic. And so I was playing around with this and was trying to time it. So I'll start that motion forward and then add a keyframe when it's fully there, but you can't see through it. So we've got to come down here to the bottom and take the opacity down to about 63%. And also notice on the left that background is blurred a bit. So if we bring in the Gaussian blur filter, I can maybe raise that up to about 14%, and we'll see that it's blurred just a bit, but we want it to blur after the green graphic appears, so we'll make sure it's 0 before that happens. All right, so that's just a quick way to reveal a title and also add in a green see-through graphic. All right, so we see a lot of these titles that are placed in the video that go behind a subject, and I have 2 video clips here. One is the deadlines, and then the second one is traffic, and then I'll also show you how to skew that title. So if you want to try this, I've attached the taxicab footage, and just go ahead and download that and see if you can create the same lesson that I did here. So if you drag in the New York City, and then if you hold Option down and then take the left button down on the mouse and just drag that video clip up 2 layers, you'll put the title in between. So then go to File, New, Legacy Title. There are other ways to make titles, but this is what I like. And you can stretch this window open. Once you do that, if you click this icon up above, it'll toggle back and forth between showing the video in the background. And if you type in traffic, and for this I'll just pick one of the defaults down below, scale it up so it's a little bit bigger, and then I'll use the pointer over here and position it right around the car or the taxi cab. Once you save it as traffic, you'll see it show up over here in your project bin. Grab that title and place it in between. And then what you'll do is click the top layer and grab this pen tool and make an outline around the taxi cab. And you'll see how it cuts out the top video. Now it's difficult to see what that is because it has been duplicated. But what it's doing is it's cutting out the top layer of video, and the second layer is the title, and that shows through. And remember, the camera is looking from the top down, so like Photoshop or other programs, you have the layers and they're stacked from top to bottom. And then what you do is you can get a little bit more precise and follow the edge around the taxi cab. Now if I check the eye, I can toggle that base video out so I can see what I'm doing. And then zoom in to 200%, and you can add a few more dots around that outline to get more precise around the contrast between the yellow and the black. Now there's also a feathering tool, and if you take out all of the feathering and just make it 0, then you get that hard edge. Sometimes it will be more useful to have the feathering, especially like on somebody's body where you don't see, like the fabric is a little bit more fuzzy, and that can help you. But for here, it helps a little bit to just go down to 0 so you can see what the contrast is and then zoom in. Now the other tricky part of this video is you have cars that are moving. So the other video that I initially showed you with the girl, she's not moving much, that's a lot easier to mask because she's not moving. And this, you have to cut out the mask. Then you need to make keyframes for when the taxi moves. And so you have this mask that's got to move, and you see when I select the mask path, it will start adding keyframes for me when I grab the mask and then let go. There, put a keyframe there for me, or you can manually do it. If you select the stopwatch right next to mask path. So now when we back up, if you want to get rid of that look of the mask path, just click on like something else like opacity or something, and then it will disappear for the moment. But as long as we are selecting the mask path, then we'll see the blue outline. So now you get the idea of what's happening with the traffic title. Now something else I initially did was I made the traffic parallel park basically, and I used an effect which was basic 3D under the perspective folder. And you can swing it on the axis forward or back, or tilt it left or right with the swivel tool. And you can also help it along by using the position and move the XY coordinates to make it move faster from left to right. So first we'll add this swivel effect, and we'll decide where that's going to be based on that marker, that vertical blue line, and you can move those keyframes if you want it to turn in a different spot, and that's where you make the adjustment. And you can see where that mask layer is as I turn this. And so there will need to be an adjustment there, which we will go to in a sec here. So there's a gap there, and that's because the taxi is moving and we need to adjust that mask. So now we can move it at that point in the video, which it will create another keyframe for me. So see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different keyframes. And you can spend a lot of time on this, and you can get really close to the taxi cab and zoom in and put more dots around and play with the feathering until you think it's pretty close to perfect. A lot of the times when people see it for the first time, they won't notice all of the errors, but you definitely want to get as close as you can, and it just takes a little bit of patience. And you can go, frame by frame, or you can go, 10 frames at a time and add in where you think that mask should be at that time. So if you want to try this, I've attached the taxi cab footage, and just go ahead and download that and see if you can create the same lesson that I did here. Alright, so I want to give you a couple different examples for shooting green screen footage. We have two candidates here. We have our close-up, which would be something like an interview, and then we have a special effect using the whole body on a whole green screen layout. And I want to start by showing you the basic way to do green screen, because it's going to help you if you are ever shooting green screen footage. Made a lot of mistakes in the past by not having even lighting, and I want to show you what that is. So we're just going to use a color key filter effect to demonstrate that, and we're going to take out the different colors of green. So you can see that it's not like our original interview footage where the lighting is even. It's got like 4 different shades of green. And so if you have your color key filter, you would drag that on your footage each time for each color of green. And if you look over here in these effect controls, you can see the difference in that color of green just by using that eyedropper tool. So what I do is I go through this, and you can open up the filters here on the right side and just drag that color key filter for each color of green. And then what you will do is you'll take out that color tolerance, and you can slide that right to left to take out the green until it starts taking away from the subject. Now, something else I like to do is I like to place a white background behind the subject, because sometimes it looks like you have it right. So if you take this titler and open it up, you can just create your own white background, title it white BG or something like that, and then you can bring it into the background, and that will give you a little more precision on taking out the green. And you can place that right underneath. So we have our main video on video track 2, and underneath is going to be whatever you want your background to be. So in this case, I'm using white, and I'm going to toggle back and forth until I get it pretty close. Now remember, this is not the best way to do green screen, but it will help you when you are shooting, because you'll look for even light. You don't want any shadows on your background, and it will make your post-production a lot easier. So what you want to do is you want to keep playing with the color key, and to identify each one, you can toggle that FX in or out, and you want to keep making your adjustments on the color by taking out the tolerance and thinning out the edge, and also feathering the edge. And you want to just keep playing with that until all of that green is gone. And you may have to bring in, 3, 4, 5 different colors of green to get really precise. Now if you look, you can see that all of the shades of green are just a little bit different in effect controls. Now something else you can do is right over here on this window is you can zoom in to 100% or 200%, and you'll notice those hard edged lines around your subject. So you can really feather out those hard lines and soften the edges when you zoom in. And again, you're doing this over white, so a lot of times, when you put in that detailed background, if you can get the white at like 90%, the detailed background will take a lot of those noticeable imperfections away. Now, another trick that I use is, say you really have some bad lighting, and a lot of times you will, because you're going to go somewhere and you don't know what the location is going to be like unless you're shooting in a studio. But a lot of times you have this mobile green screen that you're setting up. Now, what you can do is you can use the transform filter to crop out the left and right. So that way you don't even have to worry about what's on the left or right of the subject. And you want to get as close as you can without cutting anything off. So look for movement, hand movement. In this case, I think she moves her hand. So you just want to make sure that that's not cut off. But that will eliminate, like maybe 50 or 60% of the green. And then you only have to work on what's right around the subject. So if you bring that over, you can crop out the left and crop out the right, and then a little bit on the top and bottom. But those are the techniques that I use: zooming in or out, cropping out what's not wanted, and bringing in 4 or 5 different shades of green. This is for, again, bad lighting, a bad green screen setup that doesn't have a really nice, even flow to the light and green. Now I want to show you something that is 10 times easier. Now look how easy this is, and I was shocked when I first discovered this Ultra Key. But if you grab this Ultra Key filter, drag it over, it almost instantly takes out all of the green. And then if you open up this matte generation, and if you come over to pedestal, you can crank it up until you see most of those imperfections gone. Now if you zoom in again to 200%, you see a little hard edge around the body, and we can fix that. But also you see some green that's not taken out on the background. So you want to crank that up until it's gone. Now, to clean up the edge of a subject, you can come over here to matte cleanup and work with choke and soften. So choke is going to choke out the remaining pieces, and you can soften the edge. Then if you go back here to fit, you can put her back in the right aspect. And the last thing is bring that white background in underneath on video track 1. And you see that there's still some imperfections that we couldn't see on the black. So that's why I like to bring in the white for those remaining pieces, so I can fix that. And if you play with the contrast and also the midpoint, that will give you the last piece that you need. Oftentimes, if you don't know what something does, just experiment with it. I have had too much fear in the past, like I don't want to touch that because I don't want to mess it up. But it's good to just grab something and see what it does. Sometimes, like for instance, midpoint wouldn't do anything for me on another video. So, but on this one it does a little bit. So if you play around with those buttons and parameters, depending on the footage that you have, it can be useful. So you see that this looks pretty good now using the Ultra Key. Now I'm just going to bring in these clouds and place that underneath. Now I'm going to use effect controls, and this is how, if you really wanted to fly, you could have her standing up and her arms would be straight out like she's flying, and then you could rotate her and have a moving background, and that's how you could make someone fly with a green screen effect here. So for this, just for this demonstration, I just want to have her fly out of the screen. So I'm going to rotate by having keyframes, and I'll scale it down so she's at 50, and then I'll bring her down to maybe 14, and at the end of my clip there, and have her just sort of rotate off the screen. So that's not the best image to use for someone who's flying, but if you wanted to fly, you would definitely want that full green screen room to go underneath the subject so you can get the full body. Now this clip here, this is going to be more of your traditional interview, and the lighting is a lot lighter and it's still not perfect. You can see a darker shade of green at the top, but it's very close. We'll start with the Ultra key, we won't mess around, and if we just drag that filter over, almost immediately it disappears. And if we used pedestal and crank it up until we see that go away, now we have a pretty nice look. Now the hard edge on her hair on the right side also, you see it's really jagged, and that's something to pay attention to if you're filming an interview. So you see the left side, her hair is combed, and it's there are no straggling hairs, and it makes it easier to key out. So we'll bring in the white again just so we can see the difference. And under matte cleanup, you can play with the choke and softening it until you get that edge where it's not real hard and crisp, but it's not so choked out where you have this green glow around someone. So you need to find the balance between the hard edge and also that glow. I see some bad green screen stuff out there where there's this sort of halo effect around the subject, and it's just feathered out way too much. And now, if you wanted to get that look like you're really shooting with a DSLR camera and a prime lens, or a lens that will blur the background out, you can bring a background in. You can use Gaussian blur under the blur and sharpen folder and blur out the background. We'll just blur it a little bit here, but you can really make it look like you've got a really nice camera lens. And to a lot of people, they won't be able to tell if it's green screen or if it's a camera. But for those who do this all the time, they'll be able to distinguish whether or not it was shot on a green screen or with a camera. So the idea is to not have your subject so crisp. You want to be able to have a little bit of that softening around your subject. So we see here it's still a little bit hard, but you'll have to... This is the beginning of my YouTube video, and I talked for a few minutes in front of a green screen. So my first step is to key out the background. So today we'll look at Ultra key. First thing is I'll raise my video track up to track 2, and then I'll bring in my background for track 1, and I'll scale it back a bit. This background gives it a little bit of dimension, so my goal is I want it to look like it's in a real room. The next thing I'll do before I add my Ultra key is I'll go to Lumetri Color, and I just want to take down the exposure. Sometimes the video's a little saturated. I want to make sure that I do all of that before I add in the Ultra key. The next thing I can do is type in Ultra key, and you'll see that filter, and you can just drag it onto your video track, the talking head video. So when I add Ultra key, then I have the eyedropper tool, and I want to select the best spot in the video. You see the right corner doesn't do much for me, but the upper left does. So you have some uneven lighting at times, and you want to first start with picking the most even keying out that Premiere will give you. So pick that spot first. Once you do that, you can come down here to pedestal, crank that up to 100, and it will get most of the green out for you. If you have some shadows, you can use highlight and shadow, and you can see the difference there. If you really want to get particular, you can zoom in and you can look at the edges of the person talking, and you can use choke. And you want to make sure, as you see this, it's taking my ears and making them, much smaller, which is okay, but sometimes it doesn't look natural, right? So you don't want to choke too much. You just want to make sure that you don't make the person's head, unorthodox and looking, unnatural with those two commands. And depending what look you're going for, you can use those same Lumetri color effects and maybe take the exposure down in the background so it's not so bright. That's what I did here. Then what you want to do is highlight track 1 and 2, the background and the talking head, and nest those together just so they're one piece. It gives you a little bit more ability to add some more effects. Now, what I did was I added a lighting effect. So what you do is type in lighting and just drag that over the nested sequence. And then go to light number 1. You could colorize the light by choosing that color tab. I wanted a kind of a gold orangish look. So I picked that color, and then you can intensify it. You can increase the radius, the angle. There's a lot of different things that you can do here. You can move it further away from the subject, and now it's starting to look a little bit more natural. So I've got a little bit of that gold orange tint, and you see the original and then with the light. So it softens it up. And then you could also play with the exposure and things like that if it's a little bit too dark. It just plays with your eyes a little bit, gives you something else to look at. And if you wanted maybe more of a blue look, then you could go back to that color and select blue. And see, now it's a little bit more, you know, mysterious. So once you play with the intensity and the angle and you get the focus, radius and intensity, and then also the position of where the light is and the angle. So it gives you a lot of parameters there to adjust how that will look. Now for the right side, it's pretty dark, so I'm going to go ahead and see if I can add in one more. Now I can go down here because it gives me 5 lights, and it could be, you know, omnidirectional, or it could be a spotlight. So you choose the type. I'll go ahead and pick spotlight here. So we can change the intensity or the focus, and that's a little bit too bright, but let's take it back down. So let me see here if I can change the color on this one. So I select that color, white, and then I want to pick red. You know, if you're doing like a crime series or something like that, that might be a little bit more fitting. So you can change the whole look and feel of your video. So you see a lot of YouTubers that actually have the lights behind them and it's a real set. But if you don't have that, you could do something like this. You don't have to worry about going out and buying a light that you don't like the color and the bulb and stuff. You can just do it here. So I'll make it a little less dramatic, and I'll take the intensity down. But now you see I have blue light on the left, a little red light on the right. Now the next thing I do is, since this really slows your computer down, the lighting, it's just, I don't know, it just takes a lot of work to put these on there. I do this first, and then what I do is I just export this whole video the way it is. And then once I have it all flattened and compressed as a new video file, it's as if this is how I shot it out of the camera and out of the studio. And now I've got this video file that's a lot easier to work with. So we'll do that on the next lesson. I'll take this video that I've made here with these lights, and it will be a new video, and we'll start cutting out my monologue to make it move a little bit quicker. So in this video, I want to be able to show you how you can match a font. I'll get videos sometimes and it will have a font, and there'll be brand guidelines and they won't know what kind of font it is. So you can actually take a picture, upload it to Adobe Fonts, and it will use its AI generator to kick back a few suggestions. You're left with maybe 10 instead of scanning through each individual font layer to try to figure out what it is. I also have a link to my free course. I just launched it, so if you want to check that out, you can enroll, and it's free. There's no credit card or anything like that. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm delivering new content each week. So this is Alex Hormozi. He's pretty popular, and he had this title in the background. And if I needed to recreate or edit a video, like to use that same font, it's pretty crazy. But if you just take a picture, so just take a screenshot of the number 1 here, you can find that same font just from uploading a picture. But first we'll just create the one with a different font that I have already installed, and you can see that that one doesn't have a base for it and the top doesn't have a point. Now if you wanted to add a background, you have these effects that you could add. You could create a background by checking the box, and you can also round the corners. There's 3 parameters here, and you can also change the opacity. So if you wanted to create that same graphic, you could do it that way. But for this, I just want to be able to show you how to match a font. So now that we have it about the right size, I don't have this font in my arsenal. So I want to be able to upload a photo. So if you check that small little infinity circle that represents Creative Cloud, it will take you to this font section. Now the next thing is click this small little camera in this window and upload that screenshot that you took of the number 1. So there it is. And if I upload that, it will analyze it, and then you can crop it. If you had a whole picture, you could crop out all of it just for the 1, but I just took a picture of the 1. Then you can type in 1, 2, 3, 4 for the sample text that you wanted to find, and it will go and search for similar fonts. Now, you know, there's millions of fonts to look for, so it comes back with maybe 10 or 15. Now it's already italicized, so it's slanted to the right, but I found that font and it happened to be Poppins. But then once I do that, I install the font and I come back over here, and then I type in Poppins because it's now installed. And now you can see I have that number 1, and to make sure that it's accurate, I can take the opacity down and just place it right over, and you can see that it's an identical match. To learn more about Adobe Premiere, you can scan this QR code and it'll go to my course. If not, just thanks for watching the video, and I'll post videos every day here on YouTube, and you might be able to see some cool things there. So looking at this, if we were sharing a project file, would you be able to tell me, just based on the colors, which track is the center camera track and which track is the side camera track? Now, as you navigate in further, you can probably answer those questions, but if I had it labeled as different colors, you would be able to identify it quickly if I said, hey, the orange track is the center camera, and the light blue track is the side camera, and the green track is the green screen track, on top of other naming conventions like renaming the files and also just, knowing that your footage is labeled. But this is just one quick visual cue that can help you when you're determining what track are you working with. As you want to get more organized, you can highlight these pieces and label them. You might have one that's just a sound effect track. You might have a B-roll track. You might have a camera track. You might have a music track. Especially when you're sharing project files, you definitely want to make it look nice for other editors. And if it's organized color-wise, it can help. You might even have a green screen track, and you might have a special effects track, and so forth. And so this will help you identify it without even looking at your footage. You just want to be able to see, oh, the violet track, I know what that is. That's just a title track. The way you do this is you hold the left button down on the mouse and you roll over the track that you want to recolor. Then once it's highlighted, right-click and go to label and select the color that you want. So for this one, it's magenta, and I just know that that track is going to be my B-roll track, and I place all my B-roll as those colors. Now I have my music track down here on the bottom, and for me it just helps if I know that all of my music is labeled yellow. And then my main voice track, I might want to label that, but I need to differentiate that between some of my sound effects, and so I will label that a different color. All right, so now you might be asking yourself, so what's the big deal? Why do I need to color things differently? So now watch how I can communicate this to another editor. I could ask you, hey, go ahead and look at the center camera shot. It's the orange one. Now immediately you know it's the first track, the first video track. And then I could say, all of the green screen footage, that's track number 4. Or I could just say, just look at the green. That's communicating between you and another editor, but even when you're editing, I may just work with 2 tracks, the center camera track or the side B camera, right? So just when I have 2 tracks and I have one is orange and one is blue and one is a different camera angle and I'm cutting away from that, it just offers a trigger which can help me in my thinking process as I'm constantly not navigating around. I can just know blue is always going to be my side angle camera and orange is always going to be my main camera. And it gives my mind a trigger so I don't have to constantly remind myself of what is this footage and what is that footage. So there's a couple advantages other than just making it look pretty with all of these different colors. It really can help to trigger your mind so you're not constantly going back and looking at footage over and over again. So that's the reason why I do it. This is a current project that I have, and there's 2 things that you can do to make your editing go quicker. This resolution button over here on the right, it says full. That's full resolution while you're editing. It has no effect on the final output, but sometimes things can get a little bit slow as you add a lot of effects or videos to your sequence timeline. So you can work in 1/8 resolution, a quarter resolution, a half. If you just toggle down on that tab, you'll be able to see the difference in performance while you're editing. But it doesn't affect the final output. It's just the working resolution. The next thing you can do is you can create a proxy. Now, what a proxy is it takes the video format that you have and replaces it with the same video but at a low resolution, and then you toggle it on or off. So what you do is, I have this footage for an A-cam that was shot. So what I can do here is just right click, go to proxy, and create proxies. It's going to give me a choice of what format I would like to have it dump down to. For me, it's the whole idea here is to get performance the best way possible. So I'm going to pick the lowest resolution proxy, and that will make the file size much lower. So then I hit OK. And then you have to have media encoder. And if you're getting the app from the Creative Cloud, you can download this one as well. And it'll open up and it will go through the whole process for you and start encoding that video file. Now it's converting it to the format it's suggested to me. When it's done, it will place those files next to the original files, and you can see that it adds the word proxy to each clip, so you know the difference between the two. But if you look at the file size for each, you're looking at 38 gigs versus 96 megabytes. And so when you compare those, the original source file, I record at the highest resolution, 100 megabits, per second at 4K. So that's a huge strain on the computer, especially as you add more and more video clips to your editing sequence. So, and the last thing, when you go back to the sequence timeline, all you do is just toggle the proxies on when you want to go through more fluidly and quickly, and just toggle it off to go back to the way it was originally. So a lot of times you'll have a client and you may have an hour video and you'll have to make a transcript, and Premiere will do that very quickly. Just go to text right here and then go to transcript, and then that blue button says transcribe. All you do is hit that button and you wait for Premiere to process. So now you've created a transcript, and you can go through and spot check to make sure that all of the words are correct. Sometimes there might be one or two words that aren't, and you can go ahead and modify that transcript as you listen to it. But as you click on these words, it will actually find that spot, the corresponding spot in the video. Now, once you have that, the next thing you can do is you can export it. So you can export it to a couple different file formats, but the one I use is just a general text file. And once you have it in a text file, then you can highlight and copy and paste it into a Word document, export it as a PDF, and send it to your client. So the text file is the best one for me because it records the timestamps in the video, and then you can do some slight modifications with it. So for me, I'm grateful because you might have a video that's seriously 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, and you can make a transcript for someone in just a few minutes. Now, once you have your transcript, if you click these three dots over here, you can create captions. Hit that blue arrow for captioning preferences. You'll be able to make some adjustments before you generate the captions. Now, what this is good for is maximum length in characters. So that's the number of characters across the screen. So you also have a duration in seconds. So how long do you want to see those captions on the screen? So now what you can do is take this maximum length in characters and make it around 10. Once you do that, you can generate the captions again, and you'll see now it's just one word on the screen. Now they're too small, so if you highlight all of them, come over here to Comica Axis, which is the popular font on YouTube, and crank it up to say 89, and then you can change the color to green or something, and then you can also add a stroke around it. And if you scroll down, you could add a background if you wanted to. But now you're looking at this popular trend. And as we scroll through it with one word on the screen at a time, now if it doesn't come out the way you want it to, you can still modify these. And it works just like you're editing video. So what you can do is, click on one of the words. So right here, I don't want two words on the screen, I just want one. So if I click there, I want to remove, let's say A, and now I can go down to the subtitle caption area. Now I can copy this caption title just like I would with any video and hit Option and drag it to make a copy. And then now I have two lower lowers. And if I go to the first lower that I just generated from copying, I can change that back to A. So if I just highlight it, I can hit A, and then I can modify, the end so it syncs up. So when you're really getting into the critical details on captioning, you can modify the words and make sure they show up on the screen when the voice is talking. Now here's the tricky part. If you want the captions to be included and embedded into your video, you need to do one or two things here. You have a choice to burn the captions into the video. If you go to export and you are exporting the video, you have to toggle this switch on in captions to make sure that it's burned into the video. Now, a lot of times if you're uploading videos to things like platforms such as like Canvas and things like that, You can create an SRT file, it's just the file extension, so that allows you to upload a separate caption track. But most of the time, if you want the captions to appear on your video, embedded into the video like this style here, then you're going to have to export it and turn that caption toggle on and burn it into the video. So I wanted to be able to give you the very basics on color correction. So this is sort of a washed out beach shot, and we're going to see if we can add some different looks to it. So if you go right up to the top, you can select color, and then on the left side, if you select Lumetri scopes, you will be able to see some of the tools that are available that give you some identity regarding red, green, and blue, and you can right click and select the presets there. Now on the right side, I'll go through a couple of these. We won't go through every single one of them because we're just looking at basic color correction. And Premiere gives you some of these defaults. You can select different looks and then pick the look that matches. If you just want to have a different look, you can select through these. I think they're called LUTs. Now, so you can also change the exposure, the contrast, and notice these meters on the left hand side are identifying the red, green, and blue. The maximum number for red, green, and blue is 255. And that's the, if you single out red, green, or blue, 255 would be the max green or red or blue, and then 0 would be black. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those meters do on the left hand side, but for now you can look at basic correction and you can adjust some of those things. Now if you want to get creative, there are a lot more presets in that, and you can select any of those. You can't toggle all the way through quickly, so what you can do is select those, and then you can use the arrows on the right or left of the picture, and you can go through each one, or you can select one and start playing around with the color wheels. If you grab the center, you can move towards the blues and greens and violets and that kind of thing, and it will start changing the color for you. If you don't like what you've done, you can go back and hit that arrow at the top, that half circle, and it will reset it for you. So as you navigate through, you can use that right arrow or left arrow, and it will select different presets. And then if you like that one, you can just click in the center of the screen, or you can click in the center of the image there, and it will apply it. So you see a lot of cool looks there. Now regarding red, green, and blue, the three primary colors that make up your video, you can select red or you can select green, and you can grab that and bring it all the way up, and you see green is at max levels at 255 and or 0, and you can do the same thing with blue. So when you want to single out some of the colors, that gives you a little bit of control. Now we'll skip down here to the vignette. This is a cool little feature, and you see this quite a bit on videos where it adds just a little bit of black around the outside. That's a trend that you see quite often. This allows you to start with a basic circle or a widened rectangle type circle with rounded edges, and you can start playing around with how hard or soft you want those lines to be, and how dark or light and that kind of thing. So it gives you another added look, and it can be a cool little feature for your videos. Now on the left side, if you want to see the different meters that are there, you could right click and select the ones that are available. For this one, I just want to show you the waveform, the RGB. And when you look at these values, again, you have 255 on the right side and 100% on the left. And it's very similar to an audio meter when you have these sounds that peak above where they're supposed to be. It's the same thing when it analyzes the red, green, and blue. You'll notice that if there's too much blue, it maxes out at 255. And right now there's a little less blue than 255, and you can see that blue goes either up or down. So right now it's at 0, so it's all the way down and there's no blue. And then when you bring all the blue up, you can see it maxed out. Same thing with the green or the reds. It's going all the way to the top or all the way to the bottom. So as you're looking at maybe some footage that you shot, this can be helpful in determining, how much red do you have and how much blue do you have in your actual shot. Notice here the subjects on the left side, they're showing in black on that meter because there's no color there. So as you play the video, you'll be able to see the actual subjects and where those colors land on the waveform. As you get more precise, you could use this color wheel here on the RGB curves tab, and you can create these keyframes in there, and you can select blue or no blue, and it gives you a little more precision, and it's easy to do as far as taking out colors or adding colors in. So right now with this particular preset, we've got a little too much blue on the sky, so I could use that color wheel and I could remove some of it. Alright, so I hope that gives you a basic idea of the color correction, and you can use this to modify your footage. Now something else, here's another effect, which is speed. So if you wanted to speed up the movement, you can right click, hit speed, and then adjust the length of the video. So a shorter video is going to obviously increase the speed, and a longer video is going to slow it down. So that's one way to add fast motion or slow motion, and you can play with the percentages. 60% would slow it down, 200% would double it and speed it up. You can also reverse speed if you check that box, reverse speed. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is drag the bottom video clip in and then go to Effect Controls, and right now that X coordinate, which goes left and right, is at 960. Now if I drag this video all the way to the end, remember now you have 1920 pixels from left to right. So if I want to find the middle point, if you had 960, if you're starting at 960 and you add 1920 pixels, the difference between 1920 and 960 is 960. Now let's drag in the aerial footage, and I'm going to trim off the end just so they're the same. Now this one I'm going to use that Effect Controls number, same number, and I'm going to drag it over to the left, and I'm going to bring it all the way into the middle there. So now I've got this one on the left and the other one on the right. Now I had a black line in between, so let's say I go over -3 or 4 pixels. Now I can have that black line in the middle, but it's not 100% accurate as far as are they both exactly the same distance from the center. So I'll move the other one over another 4 pixels, and now I have that line. Now there are other ways to do this, but this is just an introduction into how to split the two videos down the middle. Now if you notice the aerial shot on the left, I've got this train moving on the track and you can't see it. So now when I want to get more precise, I want to see that train in the video. So another way to do this is I'm going to drag the video back so I can see that train, and I'm going to crop out the right of the video. So let's drag the cropping tool. If you go into Effects under Transform, now going to Effect Controls, I can grab the right side of the video and take the right side off, and that's another way to do it. And the video is a little bit better because now I've positioned it accordingly to see that train. So that's an advanced step. Now if you don't want that cropping, you can check that FX box in Effect Controls and it will go on or off. Now one more thing you're able to do here is I can change the brightness and contrast. The videos look a little faded, So if I drag the brightness and contrast filter, which is under the color correction folder, if I drag that in here, then I can change the brightness and contrast. Alright, so those are two basic effects to split two videos on the screen at once and also change the brightness and contrast. Alright, so I want to be able to show you the difference between a wide aspect ratio and a vertical aspect ratio. So you have 16:9 or 9:16. So this is just sample footage. It's 5G stock footage. If we scroll over here, we can see what it is. It's 1920 by 1080. The vertical clip that I have is just my dog on the iPhone. It's in 4K, so it's 2160 by 3840, but it's vertical. So if it was 4K horizontal, it would be 3840 by 2160. So the width is always listed first, and then the height. So I have two clips here. I've got the 5G clip, which is horizontal, and then the vertical clip of my dog. When we first start editing, it will dictate what the surface area is going to be when I bring my first clip into the sequence timeline. So I'm going to drag the vertical clip in, and it now is giving me the surface area, and this is going to be the final output. So when I export my video, this is what it's going to be. So now if I go to my 5G clip and I bring that into my existing timeline with this vertical setup, it doesn't quite work. Now I can do a couple things here. One is to go ahead and scale this up so it matches my vertical output. You could still do that. You can still incorporate, 16:9 videos into your vertical surface area. These are the two things that you need to differentiate. Let's say I want this to just be the traditional 16:9 or 1080p. So I've got my clip here and I'm going to drag that in. Now it's saying this clip does not match the sequence's settings. Change sequence to match the clip settings with a question mark. Now I can change the sequence settings to match this, or I can keep the existing settings, which is what I have set as vertically. I'm going to go ahead and change it. And now I can operate to match the source clip, which was set up at 16:9. And the tricky part of this is when you're ready to export the footage, are you going to export it as 16:9 or vertical? You kind of need to work backwards. You need to know what your export settings are going to be before you actually start editing your work. One thing you can do is if you go up here to sequence, you can go to sequence settings, and that gives you all of the parameters that you need to modify things or look and see what it is. So if you come down here to the width and the height, it tells you the width is 1920 and the height is 1080. You can also modify this. You can see it's locked here, but you can change it there, but I often don't use that. What I do is I go to the same thing and you can customize it by typing in what you want it to be up here. So remember, the width is the first number and the height is the second number. So we can see that this is larger than this smaller number. What if I want to change the 16:9 to 9:16? Then I would switch these. So I can just type in what I want, which would be the reverse of that, which would be 1080 and then 1920. And I hit OK. And then now you see that the video clip doesn't fit, but I've changed that aspect ratio. If it's custom, it'll allow you to type this in. If you choose something that's not custom, like let's say I just want DNxR HR UHD, which is 4K, I use this a lot. It's 3840 by 2160. It doesn't give me the opportunity to modify this here. And then now it's changed the setting to 4K. Now notice this is a 1080p clip because remember we saw that down here when we looked at the size and it said 1920 by 1080. 1920 by 1080 is half of 3840 by 2160. If I just double that, so scale it up from 100 to 200, it will fill up the frame. The most important thing in this lesson is really if you're trying to make a short and you need a vertical exported video and you want that to show up on YouTube Shorts, what you do is here's my vertical source clip. I'll just take a section of it, I'll bring it in, and I want to change the sequence settings. Right now it's not vertical, so I'm going to change it to vertical. Now I'm done with my video. I've edited the whole thing. Now I want to export it. So I want to go to export. And right now, if I look at the output, it will tell me it's going to be 2160 by 3840. Remember, width first, then height. So that looks right. Now I'm going to match the source here with the preset. Now when I export it, it will come out like this. If I wanted to change it, I could change it to, let's say, high quality 1080p, but now it's changed the aspect ratio. And when it comes out like this, it's going to be a full video and it's going to have the black on both sides. And even though it looks like it's vertical, when I go to upload it to YouTube Shorts, it won't recognize it as a short and it won't accept it that way. It'll put it into the other video category. So you can even reaffirm that by looking down here at your output. It says 1920 by 1080, and then you can hit export and it will look just like this. So just to see what this looks like, let's go ahead and go back to match the source. And now it's going to be 2160 by 3840. Now I'm going to export this as vertical sample max. That's my dog's name. We'll export it, and let me go find that video, vertical sample max, and you see how big it is. It's taking up my whole desktop screen here because it's a 4K vertical shot. Let me show you what would happen if I export this just regular high quality 1080p. Let's go ahead and export this. And this is the other vertical sample max. Two different videos, two different sizes, vertical, and here's the horizontal. Be able to show you how you can export your footage. So this video that I made is only 6 seconds long, and you notice I have it highlighted up here. So before that, let's say we didn't have it highlighted. It won't export the video until you highlight what it is that you want to export. So even if you wanted to export, let's say 2 seconds of this video, you could highlight that section and export that clip. There's a couple keyboard shortcuts. It's just I and O. So if you go to the very beginning here, you can hit I on the keyboard, and at the very end, hit O. Now, if you don't like the keyboard shortcuts, you can just use the in point and out, which is mark in and mark out. So there's two ways you can do that. Notice I have this music running off during the black, and that's why I'm exporting it here. So if I had it here, my video would not be complete. So you have to make sure that you have that out point set where you want it to go. So right up here, after you're done, you want to hit this tab right here, which is export. Now it opens up a whole new set for you. And if I click here, I can see my exported video. So it's 6 seconds long, 6 seconds and 10 frames. Where do I go from here? Now notice it says Jeff SNL intro. It already put the title there. Now here's a trick for you. If I go back to edit, I can see the project again. So you can toggle back and forth between these two things. And in my sequence timeline, because I named it, let's call it something else, SNL2. Whatever you name your sequence, that's what it will call your final exported video. Now you can change it, of course. Up here, if you just highlight it, I can say Jeff SNL 55 or whatever I want. As you scroll down here, you'll work your way into this final button over here, which is export. But before you do that, there are a couple things that are essential. You also need to figure out where you're going to put this. So you want to click here, and I can't tell you how many times I've forgot where I placed something. So this is important that you select the folder where you want it to go. So for this, I'm going to put Premiere Pro class, and I'm going to put it in that folder, and I'm going to hit save, and then it will keep that right there. So that's very important. That's step number 2. Now with the preset is, it has custom. I like to pick what it is I want. So I recorded this footage in 4K. So I want to make sure that I export it in 4K. Now what I used to do, here's a question for you. If you think you will have a smaller file size by, say, shrinking it down to 720 or 480 or 1080, that's not always the case. So let's say I select 1080p. Now, if I look down here, the estimated file size, it will tell me it's 16 megabytes. And I can adjust that here in a second. I'll show you how to do that. But if I'm at 4K, it's 63 megabytes. As you move down, you select more, and you keep scrolling down. All of this stuff is default, the high, the 5.2, all of that stuff. Just keep that the same, especially for your first time around. But down here, is the bitrate settings. Now, when I used to submit stuff for like television commercials way back in the day, they wanted the bitrate, the max it could be, because you have the bandwidth on television. Before smart TVs and all of that stuff, it didn't matter. Now, you only have so much bandwidth, and you've got to get as much information across as possible. And that's what this is. The bit rate is how many bits are going through that conduit, so to speak, just to get to the other side, right? So they have 3 settings here. They have VBR, which is variable bit rate, 1 pass, VBR2. And what that is as Premiere is processing the video, it's going back and forth, and it's focusing more, like if you have a lot of effects in one section, it's going to focus more on processing that as it runs through it. So 1 pass is it's going to go through 1 time, 2 pass it's going to go through 2. Now I've done tests with these, and the CBR is just a constant bit rate, and I've had great luck going all the way down to something like 6. And notice the file size. So it's 5 megabytes. Now if I do 100, it's 79. So I have the best luck if I'm at 6. And then when I've selected that, I can see what the final output is going to be. So this is only going to be 4 megabytes. All right, so once we have everything selected like we want it to be, then we are ready to go to this export button. And remember, we placed it here in the Premiere Pro class. So I'm going to hit export. Remember the name of it, SNL2, and it's going to save it as an MP4 because that's H.264 is what I selected. Now, if I wanted something different, let's say I wanted an MOV, which is the other most popular. I can change it to MOV by selecting QuickTime. It doesn't know the file size yet, but I guess it'll be a surprise for us. So I don't export a lot of MOVs. I like the H.264 just because the file size is much less. Like even if you're looking for, stock video, you'll see H.264 is like 10 times less in file size versus MOV. But anyways, let's go ahead and we'll go with QuickTime and MOV and SNL2, and we'll go ahead and hit the export button. And when it's done, it'll say your video was exported successfully, and it will tell you where it is. Now, if I go to where that was, which was the desktop, the Premiere Pro class, and I click, and date modified was today, there it is. So now I double click on that, and here's my video. So you see how large it is. This is because I exported it in 4K. And now here's my final clip, and I can take this and I can upload it to YouTube. To get even more advanced, with Premiere comes Media Encoder. And if you're working with companies, they're exporting several at a time, you would want to send the file to Media Encoder. Now what's happening, it's going to open up Media Encoder. Now you see my clip here is now been imported into Media Encoder, and you see the output file here, which was desktop Premiere Pro class SNL2, and you have a preset here. Now you can start getting really crazy, and they give you a lot of these settings. You can pick Apple ProRes 422. Now here's another selection. We did this already on exporting, but you can select QuickTime. Maybe you want H.264. But where this is helpful is like if you wanted to do like a batch of say 15, 20, 25 videos, you send them all here, and then you can still go back to Premiere and you can continue editing while Media Encoder is doing the exporting. So the problem when you only select Premiere to export, it's tying up your machine. And maybe if you have like a video that's like 30 minutes long or an hour, it may take a couple hours just to export one video, and you still need to edit for the day. So that's where Media Encoder can really help you, as you can export all of your clips and put them here. And then when you're ready and you've selected your presets and things like that, you can just hit this play button and it will send it to the path here. And it's basically doing the same thing that it did in Premiere Pro, but now it's exporting it for you in media encoder. Remember, once you export, Premiere program is frozen in export. So by separating it out with Adobe's media encoder, then now you have the luxury of exporting a ton of clips while you're continuing your workflow as an editor. So I've been on Udemy for a long time. I started way back in the day when Premiere was, barely getting started. And then, I was taking apart the interior of a plane and putting myself in there and using a green screen and jumping off buildings and stuff like that. And so now I'm offering this course. It's for people who want to go to the next level. So there's just over 100 lessons, and I first start off with titles because titles seems like the very first place you want to go. If you're making YouTube videos, you want to do everything you can think of with titles. The next thing I look at is a reality TV show, and I look at the different layers of sound. There's no editing there, but I just wanted to point out, what's happening. Then from there, we look at bringing in music and some of the situations that you have with like licensing and things like that. Even if you are recording and let's say you don't have like the best microphone, but you can use Premiere and you can use some equalizer effects and some sound repair and things like that. Then I go into actually creating the basics for creating a talking head YouTube video. So the first thing you want to do is cut out a lot of ums and uhs and take out all the spaces. And then you want to be able to, cut from, a medium shot to a little bit closer. And so I go through some of those things and show you how to key out the background and use Ultra Key and things like that. Then I cut away a bit and I go into about 10 lessons of tech skills. And there are a lot of things in the actual program that can help you get the result on the screen. When you show videos to your clients and they watch the videos, they don't really care that you know everything about Premiere, but you do need to know those things in order to get that result. So I look at a lot of the tech things, how to organize your files, how to create proxies, how to do things like highlighting text, how to draw a circle in Photoshop with screen recording and then go and put that around your text, how to create a transcript with just a few simple buttons, and then how to, make captions and make them more dynamic, and also how to color your timeline. So when you're communicating to another editor or your client, do you see that track 3, the green track? Then I go briefly into color correction. I use the arithmetic filter, which changes the colors. Then I also show you Lumetri, and we use the different saturations and cinematic blacks and things like that to change the look. You can also import LUTs. Then we go into the essential graphics panel. So if you're thinking about creating a YouTube intro, that essential graphics panel has a lot of templates, and so we briefly look at that. I also look at perspectives, so maybe placing 4 videos on the screen or using another video and changing the perspective so it's a basic 3D, or using the corner pin effect to place a video like inside a laptop or something like that. Then we look at creating transitions. I used a couple creative transitions where I might use a couple print patterns and I have those come on the screen, aside from just maybe making a blur transition or a couple basic transitions using essential graphics. Then I actually look at a couple TV shows. So there was a TV show on ABC that had a promotional teaser where I had a layer of an actor, put some smoke in there, and so we look at that. We also look at True Detective, not this season, but the previous season, where they used layers to, have their intro, and I give you similar footage and we recreate that same opener. Then I look at some silly effects like cloning yourself. So, you can take cropping and you can leave this camera static and you can actually clone yourself. Then I look at some comic book effects, like Batman, and I give you some downloadable POW, silly stickers that you can put on your videos. Then we look at a few commercials. I have a Chili's restaurant commercial where they used a voiceover and they used text. Then we also look at a Jeep commercial and we look at some of the effects that they use there. And then I even threw in just a blast from the past, but I did this lesson on Stranger Things, which I thought was pretty cool. I used an alpha glow to show you like how you can create some dimension in your titles. And then how I used cropping with like an Ocean's 8 movie trailer. I also looked at a T-Mobile commercial using that pink opacity. Then I had this animated project for kids where you could take some basic animation and you use a plane and you have a map, a world map, and the plane goes from, you know, one country to the next. Then I added in a real estate promo with Remax where it just had 4 video clips on the screen with a logo. And I also had a 24-hour fitness promotion. Finally, in the very end, if you like sports, I used to do commercials for stadium sports screens. So if you're into sports, I've got some pretty cool effects that go with that footage. You know, in almost every lesson, I give you downloadable footage or just effects and things that you can use. There's a couple project files in there, and even there's some, you know, scribble graphics and some those POW stickers and a few other things that you can actually, you know, use in your own videos. So if you add in the coupon code 123456789, it will take 75% off of the list price. All right, so hopefully this is a good course for you, and check it out and send me a message and let me know how you're doing and what you need help with, and hopefully I can take you to the next level.